So now we'll go ahead and finish up on problem number 4 in section 2. As I abruptly finished that last video or cut it off, I said that I would ask for your apology. Actually, what I was saying is ask for your forgiveness, and I would apologize. I'm sorry about that. It kind of threw me a little bit that had been left off of this file. So again, we're looking at problem number 4, and we know that it just gave us the same labor supply and demand relation that we had before, and it gave us then this model where we have this labor demand and labor supply yielding the equilibrium values of 24 of L star and 8.5 of W star. And we did the intercepts, so we were able to create our model. In item C, I've gone ahead and said, okay, if the state of Idaho increased the minimum wage to $10 an hour, recall that that is $1.50 greater than the wage currently being paid, then how many workers would BJSG choose to employ? Well, what we're going to do now is we don't have a new labor demand equation or a new labor supply equation. We simply have a new value to put into each of those equations. So I'm going to go ahead and in the labor demand equation, I'm going to substitute 10 for W such that 75 minus 6 times 10 equals 15. That's the number of workers that BJSG would choose to employ at $10 an hour given its labor demand equation. So I've asked you to go ahead and graph this, and in doing so, when we graph that, we have the new wage here at 10. We see that that intersects the labor demand curve at 15, but that also goes ahead and extends over to labor supply, because it's not just the firms that are going to pay that, it's labor supplies that wants to receive it. Well, the firms are going to want to hire 15 at that wage, but workers are going to like that wage, so more of them will arrive such that 30 workers want to be employed at that wage, leaving a gap between labor supply and labor demand such that labor supply is greater than labor demand. And we know when that takes place that we have some number of workers that aren't allowed to work, aren't invited to work, and we call that unemployment. So I've gone ahead and shown that and shown you how I created that. It's probably interesting to note here that this is an imposition of a minimum wage above the current equilibrium wage. So this would be a wage floor, not a wage ceiling. So finally, I say, what do the results you presented in Part D tell us about the market for workers BJSG hires and the market for workers receiving the minimum wage? Please be as specific as possible. Well, I think the first thing that it tells us that we really ought to be thinking about is that we have a problem here. BJSG, as the story lead-in told us, hires moderately skilled workers, but they're earning a very low wage. How is that market able to pull that off? So that's a question that we don't have an answer to. There must be, or there clearly is, some type of friction in this market that we haven't seen, and maybe it only is being revealed to us as we really start to look at what happens when the wage changes. So we have this issue that they've got a moderately skilled worker earning a really low wage, and that's probably the most important thing that should have been brought about here, other than this change created some unemployment as well. So I also say BJSG workers would receive a wage increase, but some workers would likely lose their job, unemployment. So maybe the cost of living must be high enough that policymakers chose to expend political capital to increase the wages. And then finally, we might also know that prior to the minimum wage, there doesn't appear to be any unemployment in the market. Now, I didn't expect everyone to tell me each one of these things, but I did expect some decent discussion here that would have at least included a discussion of the unemployment that would result in this market and of this mismatch between a moderately skilled worker receiving a wage that we would typically reserve for a very low skilled worker.